Okay, now I'm still in your FET recovery notes, but I'm in lesson 55 and I'm getting on with salaries and wages. Okay, now remember we did employees contributions, which was the deductions for UIF and the pension and the medical aid. Now we're getting on to employers contributions, right? So it means that sometimes the employer as well also has to contribute. So employer contributions, the employer contributes to some of the funds, example UIF, which is compulsory for them to contribute to. The pension fund is optional, a medical aid fund is optional, and the skills development levy is compulsory. Okay, these contributions are expenses for the employer, right? So now let's look at the example and then I'll explain to you what's the difference between an employer and an employee. So what happens is, calculate the employer's contribution to the pension fund. The employer contributes 2 rand for every 1 rand contributed by the employer, right? So what is happening here is that this is the example of this guy. I think it's the same A. Adam, right? Okay, he had 8,500 rand gross salary. Then we calculated his pension fund contribution. Remember, we worked it out with the percentage. So this is going to be the amount for the employee that is on his salary. So he has a salary coming in at 8,500 rand gross salary. Then from that gross salary, they're going to subtract the 637, which will go to his pension fund, right? But now the employer's contribution, we're working it out for the employer, but be careful, it's not part of their salary. It's not affecting them, right? This is the amount he's going to pay. But now the employer is a different person and his contribution is a separate thing, and that's why they're telling you here it will be an expense for them, right? Here, this is you getting an income, but then your deduction goes off your income and you end up with the net salary. So when we do it in figures, you'll actually understand it a bit better. So if we want to calculate the employer's contribution, it's telling you here the employer contributes 2 rand for every 1 rand contributed by the employer. Okay, so that's a mistake there. That's by the employee, right? So if the employee is contributing 637.50, he's contributing 2 rands for every 1 rand, which means you need to multiply it by 2, okay, and then you're getting 1275. So this is the amount that the employer is going to pay to the pension fund. It's not coming off the salary. This is the amount that the person receiving the salary is going to pay, and that is the amount that the employer is going to pay. So now we're concentrating on the person who's the employer, right? So complete the table. Yeah, now obviously you're using the same amounts there, so we'll go through the answers just now, right? Let me just scroll up first. And let's do the medical aid fund contribution. It's the same thing. So what is happening? The employer's contribution to the medical aid fund according to the employer's policy. So calculate the employer's contribution towards the medical aid fund, and he contributes on a rand to rand basis. Remember, the pension fund was 2 rand for every 1 rand. Okay, so this is a rand to rand basis, which means this person was earning 18,500 rand, and they were contributing 500 rand from their salary, which will be minus from there, okay, as a deduction for the employee, right? So actually, from that 18,500, you're going to subtract the 500 rand. Now the employer, how much is the employer going to pay in his books? He's going to pay rand for rand, so he's going to pay the same amount. So 500 rand will be paid by him as an expense, and thus 500 is a deduction for this person here. So can you see the employer's contribution amount is rand to rand here, which is 500 rand. So this is easy answers. It would be the same 850 and 720 because you're working out on the rand to rand basis. Now UIF, okay, now those two are voluntary, okay, so it depends on your contract, it depends where you work, etc. Now we're looking at UIF. UIF is very important. It's compulsory, okay? So which means that the employee and the employer has to pay. You don't have a choice about it. And then the amount is the employer's compulsory contribution to the UIF, and is at the moment 1% of the gross salary, and it's payable to SARS. So it's the same thing. The employee pays for 1% and the employer is going to pay also 1%. Okay, so calculate UIF at a percentage of the gross salary on the following scales. So this Mr. B here, he's earning 9,400 rand per month, sorry, and his contribution has to be 1%. So for 1%, this guy needs to pay 1% of 9,400, and the monthly contribution by the employer will also be 1% times that. Now look at this estimate. Remember we did it before. It's 120,000 rand per year. So you're going to divide it by 12. So it will be 10,000 rand for the month times 1% will be your contribution, your UIF contribution he has to pay, and they have to pay 1% contribution, right? So it's the same thing. So then we move on to a skills development levy. Okay, and this is also now a new compulsory contribution that wasn't there before. It's compulsory scheme to help the skills of the workforce as well as the unemployed people. It encourages employers to train their staff. The employer can then claim a refund for the training of the staff from SETA, which is the Skills and Training Quality Assurance Body. Employers have to pay this levy, which is currently 1% on gross salary. Employers who have an annual remuneration of 250,000 rand and more must pay this levy, and it is payable to SARS. Only the employer contributes to this fund, not the employee. Okay, so now you need to remember when you see a skills development levy, they call it SDL. It's compulsory for employers who have an annual amount of money of 250,000 rand and more. So what they have to do is 1% of that gross salary they have to pay as a skills development levy. They pay it over to SARS. Okay, so you'll see it in the questions. It's the same thing. You're going to work it out the same way how you're working out a UIF, only it's called SDL. And you have to remember that the employer pays it. You cannot see it in a salary slip where the employee is paying it. No, you can't deduct it from the employee. The employer has to pay it, and then you'll see here they say they can claim it back later on. Okay, so here's your answers there. So that one was the calculations on the 94,000 and the 25,000. It was based the pension fund amount, but that was 2 rand for every rand, so they're multiplying it by 2. And here this was the medical aid, which was rand for rand, so it became equal. And then here was the UIF percentage, which is 9,400 times the 1%. That's a monthly amount. And then here we had to divide it by 12, and we got 10 rand. So you can go through these activities to revise through it. So let's have a look at the summary. Okay, here's monthly employers' contributions. Again, if you have access to print, you can print it out and stick it in your book. So the monthly employers' contributions. Look, we're looking at the person who's hiring the people or owning the business. He has compulsory and voluntary. What is it compulsory for him to do? Pay the UIF. 1%, he has to pay 1%. And SDL is also 1%, he has to pay it, right? And then he's got voluntary contributions. So if he is contributing to pension fund and medical aid fund, then he would be paying those contributions. So this, remember, separate it in your mind. It's separate from what is happening to the employee, the person who's getting the salary and their deductions. That's why this is called contributions. These are the amounts that the employer is paying towards all of these things. He's contributing towards it. It's not part of the salary slip, right? Okay, so now you need to go through these activities here as your examples and just try to work it out. So this one is employers' contributions. It's that lesson 55.